All right, so for those of you that don't know, let's start with really simple groundwork for what you're up to with ContextMedia, because you've really jumped into a business that a lot of people don't necessarily consider, might not consider the sexy business. You're not creating the next Uber or Airbnb, but you've done an amazing job with what you're doing and found a real niche. So let's give a little bit of background on ContextMedia.
No, thank you, and hopefully we're creating as much value as those businesses.
No, definitely.
It's, thank you for having me. This is such a great day to be here, and just all the diversity of topics we're discussing. Mm-hmm. Congratulations to all the winners just prior to this as well. ContextMedia was started 10 years ago with the goal of helping drive patient health outcomes, and in partnering with all the stakeholders in the healthcare industry to do so by really building an ecosystem in healthcare, because it's an industry that's so extremely fragmented. Mm-hmm. You go see your doctor and have a conversation and go home and Google something. Right. And next time you visit the doctor and say, well, doc, online I saw this, and the doc's like, wait, don't trust things you see on the internet. Right, we've all seen that.
So like WebMD kind of thing, you go home and Google and figure out what it is.
Right, yeah. And if you type the word diabetes, you're actually going to get a few 100 million hits.
And a lot of really photos that are terrifying.
Photos that are terrifying, and all these hack solutions that may or may not be true.
Right.
And usually there's a one-to-one relationship in healthcare between the patient and the physician, the pharma company that has the live therapies, mm-hmm. and the physician with very little information to the patient besides the DTC advertising. Mm-hmm. So it's a very fragmented industry, and what our aim is to build an ecosystem where we partner with every one of those stakeholders mm-hmm. to align their goals and synergies, measure patient health outcomes. At the end of the day, that's the goal for every one of the stakeholders in healthcare, mm-hmm. and empower the patient as a consumer mm-hmm. and give them more choices and decision-making tools by leveraging education technology mm-hmm. To have more engaged, better conversations.
Interesting. And you guys started it 10 years ago in Chicago. You bootstrapped the company, mm-hmm. And you've grown it tremendously. So I saw some numbers where you guys were just written up in the New York Times. Congratulations on that and the growth. But it said 400 workers at the company, as well as revenues last year, 63.5 million. Is that fairly accurate, or?
Absolutely. So it's fun when you're a fast growth company, and 2015 revenues feel like a decade past in your memory, right? Mm-hmm. So we're actually at a $100 million EBITDA run rate at this point, and awesome. Hitting nearly 500 employees. And bootstrapped.
Wow, that's pretty amazing. Yeah. So, any reason particular why you chose to bootstrap versus go out and raise and grow it? Mm-hmm. I guess you could say maybe grow faster, or is there any reason for that?
Every decision in life has a trade-off, but bootstrapping was not a choice that we made. We didn't elect into it, but we're grateful for the opportunity and the experience that created for us. Any ecosystem of entrepreneurship, nationwide, but really internationally as well, has strengths in that ecosystem, right. And other areas that are still very nascent. Mm-hmm. 10 years ago when we started, we had the strength of the hospitals, the universities, had amazing talent in Chicago that allowed us to scale our teams rapidly. And many of the people who joined our business are celebrating 7 years, 8 years with the company. They're also extremely loyal, and they stay with the organization through all the ups and downs, through all the growth. Mm-hmm. One of the aspects of entrepreneurship that was very nascent 10 years ago for Chicago was fundraising. Right. So we, my co-founder Rishi and I, were both 19 at the time. 19? Looked all of 19. Wow. We were still in college.
I thought you were 19 now. You look great.
Well, thank you. It's a lot of plastic surgery. Joking. We actually ended up, I remember putting on glasses to look older, and I would dress a lot more formal, and Rishi grew a beard to try and pass as a 24-year-old. And we were knocking on doors of investors and letting them know our vision, sharing with them why we feel so passionate about transforming an industry like healthcare by leveraging technology that had already disrupted so many other industries, F&B, retail, and healthcare was extremely an area of passion for us because of family members who had lived with diabetes in both our families and understood firsthand the gaps that we were being drawn to fill. But the investors saw it a little bit differently. Right. They saw it as 19-year-olds in a not Web 2.0, but a hardware, CapEx-heavy business calling on an extremely fragmented market like healthcare, convincing physicians to adopt technology, and
they're like,
we have a risk appetite, but this is way beyond our risk appetite.
Yeah.
And
they weren't opening up their checkbooks and writing,
right? And we wish that was his case, but in many ways, we're so grateful that we ended up not being able to raise funding because it created a very strong DNA of scrappiness in our organization, stretching every dollar the furthest it can go, and being extremely prudent about not just our spend. If you come to ContextMedia in the office, we've got these posters, fun posters, and one of them is, what's the ROI? So any spend, we think of it as an investment, and the success of the spend is considered through the ROI. And having a focus on a revenue model from day one was, again, like what enabled all of the growth for us over these years, and being able to make a lot of long-term investments, whether it's into technology, whether it's into markets, by having the not having the pressure on the annual returns. Now, of course, there are businesses, industries where absolutely being able to fundraise is essential to scaling, to growth. If you're in an industry where you've got competitors and you want to be first to market in several cities, having the support of investors, there's also so much else to bring to the table in terms of connections and in terms of institutional knowledge. So it really depends on what are you trying to accomplish, and then what are the resources that you need to take you there versus the decision of bootstrapping or fundraising.
That's interesting. Have you ever thought, now where you're at today, that you need to eventually maybe raise, or is that just still kind of as you ebb and flow with the business?
Yeah, it really is, and what we are really excited about is having had the opportunity to invest in other startups now as well. So in 2011, when we had the first moment of being able to lift our heads from building our own business, we realized we weren't alone in feeling extremely passionate about changing industries like healthcare, like education. But there also wasn't, you mentioned it's not really a sexy business, and that's so true. Healthcare innovation is now starting to gain momentum, which is extremely exciting.
But 10 years ago.
But 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, healthcare was just considered an industry difficult to innovate in. And there's still so many of those industries, transportation and logistics, as an example, to smart cities and government, energy.
Highly
regulated spaces. And we felt that we had the learnings, the opportunities, the pitfalls, and wanted to pass that on to the next generation of entrepreneurs, especially passionate with ambitious solutions to change healthcare, to change education, some of the industries that we were drawn to, and started a fund called Jumpstart Ventures in 2011 to enable these entrepreneurs as well.
That's awesome. So you're actually investing in companies. Is it just in Chicago or Midwest, or what's the spectrum of what you're looking for?
So we have companies around the country. Majority of them are in Chicago. Majority of them are also in healthcare, which is the industry we feel strongly about. But what's been an amazing blessing out of this is we've ended up learning so much. And we went into saying, well, let's share our experience and help some entrepreneurs avoid the mistakes we made. But it's been such a learning and educational experience for us being on the other side now too.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, and so to date, I think, is it 45 businesses? You've given over $20 million? Wow, that's pretty amazing. So giving back with what you're doing, that's really great. Now, let's talk about how you got started though, because you really, you did bootstrap, so the key there is finding customers. How was it to, as a 19-year-old, to go out and find a medical professional that was willing to test out your product and be that first guinea pig, if you will?
I was a walk in the park.
Yeah, right.
Of course not, right? In any of our businesses, finding those the early adopters is the biggest challenge. And what we learned through that experience was really two key lessons. One is listening. The customer doesn't know the best solution for them, but they know best their problems. And one of our core values in our culture is humble invincibility. The humility.
Say that again?
Humble invincibility.
Humble invincibility.
It's a seemingly paradoxical statement that we feel very strongly about, because having the humility to know what you don't know, having the humility to listen and learn, but having that invincible confidence to go figure it out and build the right solution for that market, that's really how we tackled those initial years. When we were talking to physicians, we gained so much insight into the challenges day to day, because it's easy from the outside to have a more idealistic opinion of an industry and how things should be, but to actually bring things to the state that we feel passionate about creating, you also have to understand where they are today, and what are some of the challenges, what are some of the trade-offs, what are some of the decisions, financial resource allocation that are holding an industry stakeholder back from being able to step into the future. And some of our best product features were actually built out of these conversations.
That makes sense. Yeah.
And once we built those features, we then went back to the physicians and said, taking your feedback, we've added this feature in, now what do you think of the product? And having engaged them early in the stages of building our product allowed for them not just to become early adapters, but also trusted advisors. And they had buy-in into the solution we then created.
That's great. So listening, literally listening, finding out the problems and creating a solution for those problems was kind of your first steps. And then I'm curious, just do you remember the first, I guess it would be doctor's office or hospital where you literally had to go in and, okay, this is what we're doing. Do you remember what that was like?
Oh, there were so many. We were actually driving around in my co-founder's mom's SUV with a TV in the back seat, a DVD player attached to it that we had picked up at Walmart, and some DVDs with education. And really started, and we still joke that my background in journalism helped with playing 21 questions with the doctors to say, why not? Why not? And that's a really powerful question. Even if a customer says no, not just walking away from that, but asking why not? What about it could make you consider this solution? And then two, the second lesson from that was persistence. We're a two-sided market. Our education platforms are completely free for the medical practice. And we partner with industry, life science companies, medical device companies, lifestyle CPG companies that have healthy solutions for patients living with that particular condition. And I still remember the very first client that we were trying to call, Rishi had left them 17 voicemails. It took 17 voicemails, and sometimes naivete helps, right? Ignorance is good.
Must have been the wrong number.
Nobody told us that that's rude, that's disrespectful. And the next time the person picked up, probably to be upset at us, but ended up engaging, and we got the meeting.
Who is calling me?
Who's calling me this many times, right?
Must be an emergency.
So we finally got that meeting and got similarly just really great feedback from that customer as well, where for them scale was a critical component, and we said we'll define scale because it's so easy to think of scale in an abstract, because scale in different industries means something very different, and scale is really a numerator over denominator. It's not an absolute number. And defining that scale, defining that market opportunity for your particular industry or sub-industry or niche industry is really critical too. One of the things we did early is, instead of trying to say, here's what we're doing in healthcare, we said, here's what we're doing in the diabetes market, which is where we started.
So you started small.
We started small, absolutely. And we believe so strongly in focused execution, which then allowed us to have a lot of learnings, have the opportunity to have meaningful market share before we started replicating that in rheumatology, cardiology, and now 23 different specialties.
23? Wow, okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, so you've talked now about how you kind of got it started. You've mentioned culture a lot with your company. Do you believe company culture plays an important role in your success or in the success of a startup?
It's the foundation. There's so many days that are really difficult. You've had a difficult client conversation, a product feature is not being built, but what keeps us all together is that foundation of culture. We actually have a very lengthy recruiting process that we created in 2009. Again, so much of what we learned through making our mistakes first. We were hiring in 2007-08 off of Craigslist.
Oh, really?
We didn't have $395 to post on Monster.
Right.
And so we were going off of Craigslist, and we looked at somebody's resume. We felt they could do the job, they had the right skills, and brought them on board. And then the financial crisis hit, and things slowed down a little bit. And those are the moments that helped us recognize whether we had the right people on this journey or not. And we also realized the right people is not defined just by the right skills. So we created a 5-step recruiting process that we follow to date, even as we onboard 40 people a month at this scale, where the very first phone call is really understanding the person, their motivations. What are you looking for in life? How do you define success in life? What's the biggest risk you've taken in life? The next round is an interview process where they meet with their hiring manager, but also a peer.
Oh.
We feel very strongly in helping a candidate understand the good, bad, and ugly in that first round, because if you're signing up for the journey, you're signing up because you're passionate about the vision. And every high growth company, every startup, small business has a messy kitchen.
Right.
And if you're going to be revealed into it 30 days into your job, it's a lose-lose situation for the employer and the employee.
Right.
Might as well be honest about it up front to say, here are things that we're doing well, here are things that we still have gaps in, which is why we're looking to continue scaling our team with just amazing talent that helps it.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and transparency is a huge cultural tenet for us as well. And as we go through the processes, it becomes more and more about the person and their fit. And by the time, and I actually just had somebody say this to me last week, I said, what made you join ContextMedia? And they said, by the time I came back for a third time, I felt like I was visiting family that I hadn't seen since the cousin's wedding. And that was so telling, that they really felt part of something. And that's what we look for, that feeling of part of something. But there's a couple of other things about our culture. One is customer centricity. We will do whatever the customer is asking us to, within means, but we absolutely will, and don't really feel that, some industries, some companies will say, well, we built this product, now it's a matter of taking it to market, which that focus is critical in the early stages, but then learning with each customer how best to adapt to their situation, their need, is critical in our culture. We actually parted ways with a salesperson once who would just hang up a phone call and just start saying things about the customer or the potential customer in a very disrespectful way.
Yeah.
And we fired the person
it's
because it's not a good fit. If you can't respect the customer who's buying from you, if you can't empathize with their point of view and actually have the humility to listen to them, we parted ways with them. But to your question, culture has been the glue in all the growth stages of our business. Now, of course, there's two parts to culture. One is culture as in the behaviors, the customs, the norms that are accepted in the environment.
Right.
And sometimes culture gets misunderstood for the ping pong table and the beer keg.
You got the keg on tap every day.
And to us, there might be different manifestations of culture. Those are perks. But when we talk about culture, we talk about the values of people. We talk about the behaviors and norms, the social contract in our community at ContextMedia. And that's what we really test for. We also actually look for people who are positive. Not happy bouncing off the walls, but people who have a positive attitude over life, over situations, because again, in a startup, there's a lot of unforeseen hurdles and a lot of friction you keep running into. And if you're not positive about the outcomes and feel a sense of ownership over the outcomes, it's easy to get stuck in the quicksand instead of feel like you can get
bring
away
everyone
from
down with you, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and you don't want that in a startup. That makes a lot of sense. Now I mentioned 400 employees. You're hiring. Like, what are you at now? Is that an accurate number, or what are you guys looking to do in the next year or so with your growth?
So the funny part is 2 years ago, we had 100.
Oh my gosh.
We've been doubling every year, but at some point the absolute numbers are so large that they're noticeable. So we've been doubling the past 10 years of our growth.
Wow.
And that's our goal again next year. We're also excited to continue to launch new products. One of the newer products that we launched more recently is a 32-inch tablet that physicians have access to 3D anatomy models on.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And a lot of these physician groups are going to their local news channel and sharing the future of healthcare. And it's just so gratifying to see the childlike, gleeful excitement from somebody that usually is written off to say doctors don't like technology. It's not that they don't like technology. It's that if you don't see the value and if it creates more work, like if you're just entering data into a database without benefiting from the information in the EMR, it is painful. I wouldn't want to do that. But and as we think about products, as we think about customer centricity, as we think about those early adopters and customers, really understanding the value proposition for the customer, not just for the business.
Right. So and we had talked backstage a little bit about some of the problems you've solved as far as, well, we've all seen, how many people have seen their doctor's signature? Can you read it? Do you remember can you even see understand what it says? Like, you guys have kind of helped digitize some of that, is that correct?
Absolutely. There's a couple of areas of the future of healthcare that we feel really excited about.
Yeah.
One of them is connected care.
Right.
And being able to, and there's so many examples of this where a nurse who checks in after a physician is trying to read the notes, and that's all they have is like poor handwriting.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. And why can't we just access that via tablets where all the information is being shared, but also, especially if you live with a chronic condition, you tend to have 3 or 4 different physicians that you're trying to manage, and they're not talking to each other.
Right.
And it becomes the responsibility of the family member or the caregiver with the patient to understand and navigate all of the different and sometimes seemingly
it's almost like they're the translator, right? Like they're coming through, they have to be a part of every conversation. That's a lot to do.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so EMRs have been really exciting to start being the database for information. But the next frontier that's really exciting in healthcare is to leverage the data we've become good at storing to actually provide insight and enable better decision making.
Okay.
And there's so many tools to that where if you're recently diagnosed with a condition and go to 2 or 3 different specialists for an opinion, they'll not always give you the exact same opinion.
Right.
And the patient then is relying on Google.
Right.
But if we can actually bring together a community of patients diagnosed with a similar condition and help them understand their preferences, their lifestyle trade-offs, and lead them into the decision that's best for them as an individual. That's what we're really excited about launching. The second frontier is personalized medicine, in helping understand each person uniquely and going a step beyond preferences and lifestyle trade-offs to understand how medication reacts differently for different people, different populations, different lifestyles, different DNA makeup, and be able to invest in that. And telehealth. It's really exciting how many different ways of healthcare is now being delivered. Patients are finally being consumers, and healthcare is finally transitioning into industry of being customer-centric as well. And having the options of concierge medical services like One Medical, having the options of telehealth and being able to dial a doc. A couple of months ago, I got back from a leadership offsite planning, and my fiance had his arm swollen that big.
Oh,
so
no.
What did you do? And we're Googling, we have some idea, but we ended up looking for an urgent care center. And I turned to him and I said, if only we could just dial a doc right now, show them this bump. We were pretty confident it was a spider bite.
Oh, no.
And it just takes 3 days to heal. We would be fine. But at 10 p.m. on a Sunday night, we're searching for an urgent care center.
You have to go to, ER.
Absolutely. Similarly with retail, health delivery model as well, and with minute clinics, healthcare is starting to become more consumerized and not really just waiting 5 months for that appointment or going to the ER. It was very binary. But there's now all these options, including telehealth, that are really exciting as we think about the next decade of innovation in healthcare.
Very cool. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about Chicago. I'm from Chicago, so I'm a big fan. Go Cubs. Right.
So do we have all day to have this conversation?
Yeah, let's just talk about this. So talk about a little bit the contrast between you based the company in Chicago after Northwestern, right? Going to Northwestern, starting the company. You've been there now for a while. You have other offices, I assume, in other places, but your still main headquarters is Chicago. Can you talk a little bit about the reasoning and contrast between it and other tech hubs like Silicon Valley, which we're sitting in?
Absolutely. Each ecosystem that we look at has so many strengths to it. For us, we decided to stay in Chicago because of the talent. That's what really brought us to Chicago, kept us in Chicago, and we continue to scale in Chicago. We found people in Chicago in the Midwest with just a really great work ethic, extremely loyal to the company, and extremely creative and passionate about our vision and our mission in healthcare. And as we've now, over the decade, seen the ecosystem scale, there's definitely gaps, but what's been really exciting to see in Chicago is the sense of village, a sense of community, a sense of support network. Our very first few introductions happened through professors at Northwestern. So if you think about the academic institutions in that area, there's a very strong network of relationships, and everybody's willing to help everybody. And they'll make that phone call without anything in ask in return. hospitals and teaching institutions, academic research centers in healthcare, clinical trials. It's just a great, and a lot of different life sciences companies based in that area as well. Our customer base had such great density in Chicago that was the second reason that we decided to stay. And third was really this idea of community. It takes a village. Starting a company is not easy, and having people that you can call and be able to share the most vulnerable moments to seek their advice, seek their recommendations is a huge asset to us being based in Chicago as well.
That makes sense. Great. And then just, you've actually got other offices, things like that. Are you still mainly Chicago? I mean, what's the breakdown right now?
Absolutely. So we have 400 plus employees in Chicago, and we have nearly 100 people in New York. Those are our two main offices. We do have people in a couple of different markets here on the West Coast as well as internationally, actually, because we do all of the manufacturing of our hardware custom. So we do have presence in China and in Mexico, but primarily based out of Chicago with the second largest office in New York City.
Excellent. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about some advice you'd give. We had, our Startup of the Year program. 40% of the founders are female founders, which is we feel pretty good about, especially this day and age. You're a female founder. Can you give a little bit of advice for them, like starting up?
One of the greatest pieces of advice that I received that I remind myself of is don't pursue perfection, pursue excellence. And there is a key difference between the two. Especially as you're building a company so rapidly with limited resources, with ambitious goals, you're not going to get every decision right. But investing that energy into making those decisions that you've made the right choices and not painting over optimizing everything. And that also goes hand in hand with the idea of picking your battles. Knowing what's the ROI on your time, which decisions are the most leveraged ones, and really focusing on those decisions being critical to the business, but also making them to the best of the ability possible. But a lot of it is, there's no idea of perfection. It's one of our other values is scrappy excellence. And we feel on many startups.
Repeat that. What is it?
Scrappy excellence.
You have some interesting. Can we go see these somewhere online?
Absolutely. So all 10 of our values are seemingly paradox, I should say, because we feel that excellence happens at the intersection of two seemingly opposite characteristics. One of my other favorites is communally competitive. When you think of community, you think of kumbaya, everybody's hugging. You don't think of tenacity. But we look for people who also have a tenacity to win, but win as a team, win as a company, win as an industry, not individually. So we look for people who are communally competitive. So we've got the way we came out with our cultural values actually was a process of involving many of our employees. And sometimes I'm asked, did you do it on day one? Did you do it later? So we actually had a list early in our business, but we waited about 4 years into the business to actually define them because we wanted to keep making these values work in progress and understand which are the 10 for us that truly transcended any stage of growth, any personality of team, any function in the business. And I was recently chatting with a friend, is that we just rewrote all of our values 2 years in, and we haven't rewritten them in 6 years at this point.
Wow. So you just kept evolving them, and now you're at a point where you feel pretty good about it. And as you add those new employees, is there any shifting there with that's a lot of new people you've been bringing on, and you're looking to add more. Has that changed the culture at all or anything like that?
So the cultural manifestation, absolutely. We actually had a guac off for the first time, which was an initiative of a new employee who said, why don't we do a guacamole making contest?
A guac off. Oh, it's like a walk off. I was like, what is a guac off?
A guacamole making contest.
Oh, that's fun. Yeah, I love
and that
guacamole.
was really fun as a cultural manifestation. But the values, we actually live and breathe them because our scorecard for interviewers actually has them ranking a candidate on those values. Similarly, our performance review forms. There's 2 pages. The first page is the values listed out, and the manager and a self-review is assessing that candidate's fit or that employee's fit in the business based on their contribution, not just to their metrics and their performance, but also who they are in contributing to our culture and who they are as a person. And we also find fun ways to celebrate people who actually demonstrate.
Celebrate.
Celebrate.
Celebrate. That got me up.
Keyword.
Keyword, yeah. Innovate and celebrate.
We actually celebrate when people do live our values in action, because that's where values can be on a wall, and we have them on a wall.
Right.
But values are strongest when they actually manifest themselves in action. And so we have a fun award called the Purple Man Award, because our logo is this purple healthy person. And when somebody goes above and beyond to live one of our values, which by definition has no requirements or specifications, you know it when you see it. Somebody's gone above and beyond. We have this impromptu ceremony where the person is recognized with this robe and crown and has 30 seconds to pick an award, which could be the person who last won did a trip to Red Rocks for a concert.
Cool.
So they're really fun celebration moments, but it's also to recognize the person who lived those values, and communicate to the entire organization what those values look like in action, and hopefully create a precedence of the behaviors, of those norms in the culture that make an employee a great contributor into our business.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for sharing what you're doing. You're really an inspiration and a culture-driven business out of my hometown. So I'm excited to have you. Let's hear it one more time for Shradha.